welcome to the Spiritual Hitchhiker's Practical Guide to the Afterlife and Beyond. Now, this show has been conspicuously or inconspicuously absent for the past month. And as I mentioned in a post here last month, Facebook, in its infinite wisdom, consigned me to jail for a while and banned me from doing lives. I did not pass go and I did not collect $200. But like General Douglas MacArthur, I have returned, if only for a short time, owing for the holidays. Tonight's show is the second part of one that I presented last month titled Frequently Asked Questions About Reincarnation and the Afterlife. Before I jump into things, I'd like to begin with a caveat. There is so much misinformation, disinformation, dogmatism, rigidity, autocratic, my way or the highway proselytizing, and downright arrogance surrounding the areas of reincarnation and the afterlife. And here's the kicker. None of it, none of it is based on science or research. I find it a never-ending source of amusement that some people state their opinion as absolute fact. Now, the only fact is that everyone has their own opinion, and quite frankly, that's all anyone has. There is no empirical proof for any of our beliefs regarding reincarnation, karma, or the afterlife. So as I did in part one, I'm going to explore and explode some of the myths surrounding topics having to do with reincarnation and the afterlife, and give you answers that are solidly grounded in the best available research, not just opinion. And when I do give you my opinion, as I will, it will always be based on best guessed research, and I'll let you know it's my opinion. And I'm going to guess that that approach is one that you'll appreciate. A great starting point for these questions is one that I frequently see asked in forums such as this. And that question is, scientists tell us that there are more people alive today than have existed throughout the whole of human history. Doesn't that mean that there aren't enough souls to go around? Now, that's an excellent question indeed, and an argument frequently used by the non-believers and the skeptics as a refutation of the concept of reincarnation. Well, bad news for the skeptic. It's now considered an urban legend based on bad math. For more than 30 years, Carl Hobb was senior demographer, I think it's pronounced, at the Population Research Bureau, or PRB, a U.S.-based nonprofit organization focused on global population, health, and environmental issues. A specialist in the compilation and analysis of demographic data and dissemination, his research and writings have been published in numerous journals and publications. In 1995, he calculated an estimate of the total number of people who have ever lived and subsequently updated it in 2002. The updated figure totals approximately 106 billion. Hobb characterized this figure as an estimate that required selecting population sizes for different points from antiquity to the present and applying assumed birth rates to each period. Given an estimated global population of 6.2 billion in 2002, it could be inferred that about 6% of all people who have ever existed were alive in 2002, according to Hobb. Now, various estimates published after 2002 give figures ranging from approximately 100 billion to 133 billion. So, at a low end of 100 billion total historical population to a high end of 133 billion, with a current world population of a little over 8 billion, that roughly translates into an average of about 17 past lives per soul. But even if the math is correct, and there haven't actually been even more total inhabitants on this mote of dust on a far-flung corner of the Milky Way galaxy. By the way, some statisticians put the figure as high as 300 billion. So, a mere 17 lives per customer, when you think about it, is pretty paltry. This is especially so when one considers that the goal of reincarnation, as some say, is to experience the full spectrum of human experience. So, why is there such a discrepancy? The answer to this apparent conundrum requires the consideration of other possibilities. I'm going to offer you six of them. Number one, reincarnation is a myth, and all of this is utter nonsense. Well, I don't agree with that one. Number two, reincarnation is real, but current estimates for previous human births are wide of the mark. The true figure is closer to 350 billion. Now, that's quite a jump, according to Hobb, although he noted that the estimates for world population at the time of the Roman Empire have been upwardly revised a few times, from less than 100 million to 300 million. So it remains to be seen if future discoveries will affect the calculations here. Number three, souls may have begun their cycle of incarnation on some other planet thousands of years ago, before reincarnating as earthbound human beings. Now, as a hypnotherapist who has conducted thousands of past life regressions in both private and group settings, I've seen this happen only rarely. And when it did happen, it had all the earmarks of fantasy and fabrication, whether intentional or unintentional. Now, I am inclined to discount this as a possibility. Number four, souls may choose to reincarnate in an alternate reality. This theory posits that when the universe grew exponentially in the first tiny fraction of a second after the Big Bang, some parts of space-time expanded more quickly than others. Theoretically, these could have created bubbles of space-time that then developed into other universes. In this case, the universe we inhabit isn't the only one, but many universes exist parallel to each other. The various universes within the multiverse, as it's known, sometimes called parallel universes or alternate universes. Now, if this is correct, then some souls may choose to reincarnate on an alternate universe, Earth, thus thinning out, in a sense, the existing current soul population on the Earth in our own reality or universe. Number five, new souls are being created all the time. Some reincarnationists believe that all souls came into being at the time of the creation of the universe, currently believed to have been the result of the Big Bang, about, was 8 billion years ago, 18, I think it was 18 billion years ago, and are constantly being recycled. It would then naturally follow that there is a finite amount of souls. But from a logical perspective, I'm moved to ask, why? Why should this be so? If the creator, quote unquote, is supposed to be an omnipotent, all-powerful, supreme being, chairman of the board, the big kahuna, grand exalted poobah, and a whole host of other superlatives, why couldn't he, she, or it create, or cause to be created, new souls as needed? Now, one would think that the law of supply and demand works in the spiritual realm as well as in the physical. If there is a demand for more souls, then the soul factory simply supplies them. That's simple enough. Number six, we are able to incarnate in more than one body at a time. The parallel lives theory holds that any soul can, if it so chooses, incarnate into more than one body at the same time. In other words, reincarnation doesn't have to be one life after another in sequence, but can involve simultaneous or what we call concurrent incarnations. And if there are a lot of concurrent incarnations at the present time, the 8 billion people alive right now could be incarnations of a considerably smaller number of actual souls, maybe 2 or 3 billion. So when Hobb played with his spreadsheet, he found that this can readily fit the data if we allow each soul to have an average of 2.6 simultaneous or concurrent incarnations at present. It also means that each of us, on average, has one or more concurrents walking the earth at this time. So be careful, you just might bump into yourself. The bottom line is, far from contradicting reincarnation, the world population data leaves plenty of room for it as a possibility, though not necessarily in a linear, one-at-a-time form. Next question. Do we have the same physical characteristics from lifetime to lifetime? Oddly enough, some people do physically resemble a past life self. While this might seem at first to be impossible when one considers that it's commonly held that we often change race or sex between incarnations, there are many human features which vary in fairly similar ways across all races and sexes. For example, a low or high forehead, fine or coarse features, thick or thin eyebrows, high cheekbones, shape of the nose, shape of the jawline, so on. While this is unlikely to be an absolute rule, there are some fascinating cases documented by photographs in which people have had more than a passing resemblance to their past life self. Now, one of these cases is that of former Indianapolis homicide detective Robert Snow, which was featured on the Katie Couric show. He bears a strong resemblance to his past life counterpart, J. Carroll Beckwith. One of the most striking publicly reported present past life resemblances is that of Jeffrey J. Keene, an assistant fire chief in Westport, Connecticut, and his past life counterpart, General John R. Gordon, Confederate General of the Army of Northern Virginia. This compelling story was detailed in Keene's book, The Confederate General and Connecticut Yankee, A Past Life Revealed, which was also the subject of various television documentaries. Now, that being said, a number of Facebook groups, which include material related to reincarnation, often have posts which show photos, and usually these are of celebrities, who bear a resemblance to pictures, portraits, or renderings of historical personages. They then cite this as evidence of reincarnation. While anything is possible, in my honest opinion, the facial resemblance of a person to someone they or someone else purports them to be is on very shaky ground as evidence of reincarnation. There are roughly 320 basic face types in the world. Some people who share similar faces and body types will be from our own cultures and very close to our own specific genetic signature, so that their skin color, hair type, and other characteristics will be similar. So on average, roughly around 0.0003% of the world's population have or have had your face. Now, if you remember my answer to the last question, total world population has been estimated to be about 100 billion people at the low end, 133 billion people at the high end. This means that, statistically speaking, anywhere from 300,000 to 399,000 people in the history of the world have had your face. Think about that. Next question, frequently asked question. Do we have free will, or are our lives predetermined? What people are, in fact, referring to when they ask this question is the subject of pre-birth planning. And no, I'm not referring to deciding on the wallpaper pattern for the baby's room. What I am referring to is the planning that takes place in the time frame between lives as we prepare for the current incarnation. It's known as pre-birth planning or life planning. Many of us have had the experience of preparing for a vacation or a trip by thoroughly researching our destination and mode of travel, planning our journey down to the most minute details. We plan all the stops we're going to make along the way, like the hotels we're going to stay in, the sights we're going to see, even the food and the restaurants that we're going to eat in. We might even engage the services of a travel agent to help us with that. And then there are those people, and times when our planning is minimal. We might decide to wing it, go wherever the four winds take us, foregoing careful preparation for spontaneity. Of course, spontaneity in its own way is also a plan. Much the same situation appears to take place in the time period between lives as we prepare for our upcoming reincarnation. As is the topic of reincarnation itself, what happens between lives is largely a matter of speculation, with Various opinions and interpretations are the results of data accumulated by investigators and researchers in the field. Empirical evidence for the pre-birth planning stage comes from two sources. First, from reports of those who have had near-death experience, or NDEs, particularly those with deeper visits into the light. And second, from reports of past life regression subjects, particularly those who have undergone between lives regressions. The remarkable similarity of details from those who experienced both NDEs and between lives regression make it difficult to argue against the likelihood of pre-birth planning. Now, researchers and investigators in the field generally agree on 2 points regarding pre-birth planning. Number one, only key events appear to be pre-planned. Things that seem major to a human might be of no consequence from the soul's perspective. Now, conversely, minor occurrences, at least from an earthly human viewpoint, may be planned since they may actually be quite important for the soul's development. Number two, once incarnated, people have free will, and they sometimes choose to create events that weren't designed on the soul level. The major area of disagreement on the issue of pre-birth planning seems to center on not whether we plan our incarnations, but to the extent to which we plan it, and whether it's done with the assistance of guides or counselors. And if so, what might that assistance be? Are we given free rein? Or are we strongly pressured into accepting the blueprint of our upcoming life? Since we apparently lead hundreds, some would say thousands of lives, with each life having the capability of being drastically different from a former existence, both views may be correct and at different times. It's generally agreed that, among other things, pre-birth planning allows us the opportunity to map out our destiny, set objectives, and arrange to meet up with certain souls to assist us in fulfilling that destiny or soul objective. In my opinion, this doesn't mean that every little thing is predestined. There is no guarantee others will fulfill their roles in our lives, and particularly those that interact with us. A coming life, in my opinion, is not fixed and detailed. Most pre-planning by the soul consists of what I call likelihoods. That is, events aren't set up as completely predetermined, but exist more as potentialities. Generalities seem to be the case. General outlines, general developments, general challenges. Apparently, much is also left to chance and improvisation. In the words of the Scottish poet Robert Burns, the best laid plans of mice and men gang after glee. In other words, they often go awry. Our best made plans and goals don't always work out in life, and neither do those made in the spirit world. Change can and does occur. A soul's emphasis might shift. Goals may be reached sooner than expected. Major world events may disrupt our plans, and so on. Any of these can necessitate a change in the life plan. We might decide to take an alternate route. Now, using that analogy of a road trip that we began this question with, we could take the interstate and get there more quickly. Or we might elect to travel the back roads to enjoy the scenery and avoid stressful traffic. You know, I think it's very much like a movie called My Life, with you as the producer, director, and screenwriter. Sometimes changes are made in the script while filming is taking place. And you get to decide whether your life is most like a Greek tragedy, a slapstick comedy, a quirky melodrama, or an exciting action adventure. Next question. If there is such a thing as karma and past life lessons, then why don't we come into this life with full knowledge of what lessons we're supposed to learn? Only sounds fair, doesn't it? That's a very common question. Critics and those skeptical of the reality of past lives often point to this inability to automatically recall our past lives as evidence against reincarnation, particularly as it applies to the question of karma. If past lives and karma were real, they argue, and soul growth is predicated on the learning of needed lessons from our previous lives, and Why don't we come into this life with full knowledge of what we're supposed to learn? Now, I think that the answer to that would be obvious. If we knew what lesson we had to learn in this life, and that a failure to learn that lesson might retard the progression of our soul growth, our actions would be forced and insincere, or from the heart. Let's use the analogy of taking a proctored exam. If the proctor temporarily leaves the room, giving you the opportunity to cheat by looking up the answers, you have two choices: cheat or don't cheat. However, electing not to cheat because the room might be monitored by a camera and you don't want to get caught and get in trouble is different than not cheating because it's the morally right thing to do. In both cases, your actions, not cheating, were honest, but in the former case, your honesty was forced, not sincere. Now, I think this question and the inherent unknowability from our human perspective of what life is all about was beautifully addressed and answered in a book called The Afterlife of Billy Fingers, written by Annie Kagan. I strongly recommend this book, one of my favorites. In this book, Annie claims to have been contacted by her late ne'er-do-well brother Billy, whose profound and detailed descriptions of his life and the great beyond forever changes her views about life, death, and the hereafter. In the book, Billy tells her that life is more of a kind of experiment, chosen for soul-type reasons that humans have an almost impossible time understanding. And not understanding is an important part of the experiment. If people knew the workings of the experiment, Billy tells her, it would lose some of its punch. In much the way I, others, believe that our karmic lessons must be learned without specific foreknowledge of what we have been tasked to do in the period between lives for those lessons to result in an advancement of our spiritual level. Maybe that's why we have a conscience, and maybe that's what intuition or gut feelings are all about and where they come from. Next question, frequently asked. If we choose our current lives during the between life state, in other words, prior to our rebirth, why would we choose to be reborn into a life of hardship or challenge? For example, poverty, misery, mental or physical incapacitation? I can think of two reasons. But to comprehend the rationale behind either of those, we have to first understand who the we, which chooses to be reborn into such life conditions, or indeed chooses to be reborn at all, actually is or isn't. It isn't the conscious mind which inhabits our physical body, and beliefs, paradigms, perspectives, and prejudices accumulated during its current lifetime on earth. The choice is made in the time period between lives by the immortal soul, with the accumulated knowledge of multiple lifetimes. So, with that in mind, let's examine the two reasons that I feel apply. Number one, unless one is unusually spiritually inclined, the average person will view situations and events from the limited perspective of their mortal minds and bodies. It's human nature to take the path of least resistance, take the easy way out. We all do it. You know we do. However, our mortal self, or our soul, sees and understands things from quite a different perspective. It knows and understands the nature of karma and the necessity to allow the soul to grow by teaching it to view and experience life from every angle. Karma shows us that as spiritual beings, we're part of a lives-long process in which we choose to learn particular lessons and have necessary experiences, no matter how distasteful our mortal minds may view them. Athletes, bodybuilders, and fitness enthusiasts will know exactly what I mean. These people understand that to reach their goal, their fullest potential, they must often subject themselves to what might seem to others as excruciating torture. As the saying goes, no pain, no gain. In the same way, I believe that the soul understands that we need to experience what we construe from the limited perspective of our mortal self as an awful life in order to balance out other perspectives, or experiences rather, to reach our soul potential and ultimately end the cycle of reincarnation by, as many believe, being worthy to join in eternal life with the Creator. Number two, from our mortal perspective, time can be interminable. As young children, our biblically allotted lifetime of 70 years can seem like, well, a lifetime. As Shakespeare wrote, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day. The operative word here is creeps. Of course, as we grow older, the days seem to pass in a blur. We wonder, why is it going so fast? But even this quickened pace pales in comparison to the cosmic time frame of our immortal souls, which have lived dozens and even hundreds or maybe thousands of lifetimes. Each lifetime passes in the twinkling of an eye, and that's a small price to pay for eternal rewards. Next often asked question, how long is the life period between lives? Now, in her seminal research, Dr. Helen Wambach reported that on the average, there was about 70 years, give or take a few, between the lifetimes of the subjects that she studied. Wambach's 70-year average was arrived at by regressing each subject multiple times, recording the years of their reported births and deaths, and then, through simple math, arriving at the 70-year average. Now, my experience with those I've regressed bears this out with a few exceptions. Those people who have died tragically or violently in a prior life seem to reincarnate much more quickly. For example, one of my students reported being killed on the USS Arizona during the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941 and being reborn less than 2 years later. In fact, this seems to coincide with observations made by Dr. Jim Tucker, who took over Dr. Ian Stevens's work at the University of Virginia. In his book, Return to Life, statistics from all his catalog cases showed a median time between the death of that person and the child's birth was about 16 months. Now, the above being said, however, we must also take into consideration that our experience of time passing is a function of our perception within physical existence. And, indeed, souls are most likely aware of the linearity of events unfolding in physical reality, but for them, there may be actually no passage of time in the between-life state. So from Earth-time perspective, several decades or more between reincarnations is typical. However, it can be as long as a couple of centuries, or as short as a couple of hours, whatever the soul chooses. There seem to be no hard and fast rules here. Next question, do we keep reincarnating forever? Many religions, which contain reincarnation as a basic tenet of philosophy, usually see it as a limited cycle which doesn't go on forever, perhaps ending when the soul has fulfilled certain requirements. The classical concept of karma is that the soul reincarnates to learn needed lessons to allow it to grow in the spiritual sense. In this system, we learn needed lessons through karma, and we carry this intuitive knowledge with us through successive incarnations. Each entity is born into each earth life with a level of awareness established in their past lives. How the lifetime is lived will dictate whether the rate is raised or lowered. When the soul attains perfection, quote unquote, it's finally awarded eternal life. Now, some see this eternal life as a union with the Creator, as we said before. For some rare souls, it may take several lifetimes. For most souls, it probably requires dozens or hundreds or maybe even thousands of incarnations, although I suspect the latter is a bit of a stretch. There's also the theory of stages of soul evolution, which posits 5 different stages: infant, baby, young, mature, and old, consisting of 7 levels in each stage. This is then followed by 2 additional stages in the non-physical realm, transcendental and infinite. And that in itself, I think, might make a good topic for another show. Next question. Can people reincarnate within the same family? In this scenario, a soul is reborn into the same family that they lived in during a previous life on Earth. Yes, so it's quite possible, but it's probably not the sort of thing that happens very often. If it does happen, it's usually because it was important for the family to experience the dynamics of losing a child in childbirth or at a very young age. Whatever that soul brought at the time to the family was very important, and it was for the family's growth and not necessarily for the individual souls. Except that when that spirit would return as a new child within that family, it would have the benefits of the experiences that the family went through in losing a child. And it probably does this for a purpose. Next question, commonly asked: at what point does the soul enter the fetus? In her book, Life Before Life, Dr. Helen Wambach described the results of hypnotizing another 750 people and taking them to the time period between their past and current lives. One of her most controversial findings was that the disembodied consciousness or soul does not enter the body until near birth. She wrote that the soul usually enters the body near birth and has a choice of which fetus to enter. If one fetus is aborted, it is possible to choose another. In some cases, the soul who will occupy the fetus is in contact with the soul of the mother and can influence his or her decision regarding abortion. Dr. Wambach found that 89% of those hypnotized said that they did not become part of the fetus until after 6 months of gestation. And the sessions that I've done bear this out. A large group said that they did not join the fetus or experience it until just before or during the birth process. They existed fully conscious as an entity apart from the fetus. And even after 6 months, many reported being in and out of the fetal body. And as I said, my own research bears out Wambach's findings. Next question. This is an often asked one. Can humans reincarnate as animals and vice versa? Well, it all depends upon who you ask. The Hindu and the Buddhist religions believe that one can be reincarnated as either a human or an animal. However, their doctrines are unclear as to whether this is the result of karma or the natural progression of the soul. One particular doctrine of the Hindu religion believes that the soul, or jiva, begins life in an extremely simple form, inhabiting a concurrently very simple body. As it grows, or the soul grows and reincarnates from one life to the next, the body it inhabits becomes increasingly complex. And when the soul has finally grown into a human body, the concept of karma comes into play. Now, as an animal lover and an advocate, I consider this demeaning and insulting to the animal kingdom. Every day, the news is filled with reports of murder, often on a mass scale, rape, torture, corporate greed, so on and so forth. And those things aren't being committed by animals. As a race, we humans seem intent on destroying ourselves when we consider global warming, terrorism, the wars we are constantly and habitually engaged in. Now look at your ever-loyal, trusting, faithful, and loving Fido or Tabby, and then try to tell me that Fido is a lower spiritual form. Some animals have mastered unconditional love, and humans have not. I think an excellent argument could be made that it would be going backwards for an animal to return as a human. But all seriousness aside, most Westerners who embrace reincarnation do not believe that humans reincarnate as animals and vice versa. In this paradigm, human spirits never do evolve into lower forms than what they have been as humans. Every form, every creation has a soul. But that soul reincarnates in the form that it is in. Dogs as dogs, cats as cats, Goebbels as Goebbels. So there you have it, folks. Two opposing views. You're on your own on this one because, as you've heard me say before, who knows? Well, that about does it for this show. Because of the holidays, I'm Tentatively scheduling the next live for Wednesday, January 15th. And I'll be getting back to you on the topic. Some of the topics I'm considering for next year are the stages of soul evolution, which we briefly alluded to today. Animal reincarnation. Do Fido and Tabby get to play it again, Sam, or is it one and done? And maybe even another installment of frequently asked questions. And a second installment of a show I did back in October that entitled Oddities and Anomalies, in which we looked at such things as the Mandela effect, time slips, alternate universes, and parallel lives. You folks seem to really get into that one. I'll also be having some interesting guests from time to time, as we did last year. But if there are any topics you'd like me to feature, then please let me know here in the comments or send me a direct message. And tell your friends about us. Remember, since this show is done within the Facebook group Reincarnation, Past Lives, and the Afterlife, they'll have to be a member to tune in. By the way, in case you missed any of the other shows in the Spiritual Hitchhiker's Practical Guide to the Afterlife and Beyond series, you can find some of them in the features section at the top of this page, the group page, or all of them on my YouTube channel. You'll see the link for that in the comments section, and if you do visit there, I'd really greatly appreciate if you would subscribe to the channel. For your information, the past life regression and therapy certification training that I spoke about in the last few of these shows is in the can, as they say. The beta testing program has ended. The alpha version will launch by the end of the year. And I'm now hard at work developing an accompanying clinical hypnotherapy online, on-demand, evergreen certification program. And for anyone out there who already happens to be a hypnotherapist, I'm also revamping and revising my advanced hypnotherapy home study courses that target specific problem areas and issues, which I originally began releasing back in the early 90s. I've got a couple of them already, completed already. Before I wrap, I want to sincerely thank you for all your support and for tuning in this year for the Spiritual Hitchhiker's Practical Guide to the Afterlife and Beyond. So until January, this is Dr. Bruce wishing you Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, a happy and safe New Year, and, as always, happy hitchhiking and happy trails. See you next year.